"I can make your father walk again," said the homeless boy to the millionaire in the middle of the street. She laughed in his face, used to expensive solutions and empty promises. But with just one touch, the leg that had been immobile for years moved before everyone's eyes. What was a miracle for some became a threat to doctors, businessmen, and the entire elite profiting from pain. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. There are traditions that defy logic. For Sophia Madison, heiress to the Madison pharmaceutical empire, one was particularly painful. Every November 15th, she would take her father, Anthony Madison, to mile marker 47 on Interstate 5 on the outskirts of Springfield. It was the exact spot where, 5 years earlier, the car Anthony was driving had veered off the road, forever changing the life of one of the most successful pharmaceutical moguls in the United States. The ritual was always the same. Sophia would park her car on the shoulder of the highway, take the wheelchair out of the trunk, and with a delicacy mixed with resignation, help her father settle in. Then she would push the chair to the exact spot where paramedics had found him that rainy night. The vegetation beside the road had grown. The guardrail had been replaced. But the pain remained intact. "Dad, we'll just stay a few more minutes, then we'll go home," Sophia said, as she adjusted the shawl over Anthony's immobile knees. The 62-year-old man, once imposing, merely nodded with a gentle movement of his head. His eyes, still vibrant and penetrating, contrasted with the immobility of the rest of his body. It was as if all the energy that once coursed through his limbs was now concentrated in that gaze. "Are you comfortable?" "It's very hot today," she asked, wiping the sweat from her own forehead with a silk handkerchief. Summer was arriving with full force that Californian November. Anthony did not respond. His silence was not new. Since the accident, words had become rare, almost precious. Sophia had grown accustomed to interpreting his gestures, his expressions, the small contractions of his face. It was a new language, learned forcefully by the only daughter who had taken over not only the family business, but also the full care of her father. Cars sped by, creating a warm current of air that rustled Sophia's brown hair. At 35, she had become a woman with a serious expression, always impeccably dressed, as if outward perfection could compensate for the chaos she felt inside. That day, her navy blue pantsuit contrasted with the vastness of the cloudless sky. 5 years, Dad," she murmured, more to herself than to Anthony. 5 years and no doctor has been able to reverse the diagnosis. It was unfair, Sophia thought. They had money, connections, access to the best specialists in the world. Anthony himself had built an empire based on science, medicine, on an unwavering belief in the power of human knowledge. And yet, all that structure had not been enough to make him walk again. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon when Sophia noticed a presence. Instinctively, she positioned herself in front of her father's chair in a protective gesture. In the rare times they performed that ritual, they had never been approached. The boy couldn't have been more than 12. Thin, with sun-darkened skin and disheveled curly hair. He wore a faded Lakers t-shirt, at least 2 sizes too big for his scrawny body, worn-out denim shorts and flip-flops. What most caught Sophia's attention, however, were his eyes. They were such a deep brown that they seemed black and had a disconcerting intensity for someone so young. "What do you want, boy?" "We're having a private moment," Sophia said, with the polite firmness of someone accustomed to giving orders. The boy was not intimidated. He looked at Anthony with curiosity, then at Sophia, and finally pointed to the man's immobile legs. "I can make your father walk again," he declared, with surprising conviction. Sophia laughed, a dry, humorless laugh. "Of course you can. And I can fly to the moon. Please go away." But the boy didn't move. He took a step forward, approaching the wheelchair. "It's the sciatic nerve that's compressed between the 4th and 5th lumbar vertebrae, isn't it? Traditional medicine calls it lumbosacral radiculopathy." Sophia's eyes widened. How could a street boy know such specific medical terms? And worse, how did he know her father's exact diagnosis? "Who are you? How do you know that?" she asked, now genuinely intrigued. "My name is Leo," the boy replied simply. "I just know these things. My grandfather taught me." Anthony, who until then had remained oblivious to the conversation, moved his head slightly in the boy's direction. His eyes, previously vague, seemed to gain focus. Look, Leo, I appreciate your concern, but my father has already consulted the best neurologists and physiatrists in the country. No one has been able to solve his problem. Because they don't know the piriformis muscle, Leo replied naturally. It's a small, deep muscle located here. He pointed to a specific spot on the back of the hip. When it gets too tense, it compresses the sciatic nerve. Doctors look at the vertebrae, at the discs, but they don't realize the problem starts here. Sophia was about to dismiss the boy again when she noticed something extraordinary. Her father's right hand, always inert on the armrest of the wheelchair, had moved slightly as if to reach out to the boy. "Dad?" she whispered, incredulous. Anthony was staring intently at Leo. There was something in his gaze, a mixture of curiosity and hope, that Sophia hadn't seen since the accident. How did you learn this?" Sophia asked, her voice now less firm. Leo shrugged as if the answer was obvious. "My grandfather was a healer back in rural Georgia. Everyone went to his house when the city doctors couldn't help. He taught me since I was little." "And where is your grandfather now?" Sophia asked, beginning to be interested in the boy's story. A flash of sadness crossed Leo's eyes. "He's gone. 2 years ago. And your parents? Never met them. So where do you live?" "With whom?" Leo looked away for the first time. "Around." Sophia felt a pang in her chest. The boy was obviously homeless, or living in precarious conditions. But how could someone in that situation have such specific medical knowledge? Was it some kind of scam? But what kind of scammer would use correct medical terminology to approach strangers? "Look, we need to go now," Sophia said, checking her wristwatch. "It's getting late." But when she began to turn the wheelchair to return to the car, she felt an unusual resistance. Anthony had held the wheel with his hand, preventing movement. "Dad?" Sophia asked, surprised. It was rare for him to show any initiative. Anthony looked at the boy and then at his daughter, in a silent appeal she knew too well to ignore. You want to give the boy a chance?" she asked, incredulous. The almost imperceptible nod was enough of a response. Sophia sighed, torn between skepticism and the impossibility of denying her father anything, especially something that had piqued his interest after so much apathy. "All right," she conceded, turning to Leo. "We can talk more about this. Are you hungry? We can stop to eat something on the way." The boy's eyes lit up, but he maintained his composure. "I really can help your father, ma'am. I'm not lying." Sophia looked at the horizon, then at her father, and finally at that strange and intriguing boy who had appeared out of nowhere with impossible promises. Something told her that regardless of the outcome, nothing would be the same after that encounter. "We'll see," she replied, with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "We'll see." As she pushed the wheelchair back to the car with Leo walking beside them, Sophia could not imagine how that casual encounter on the side of a highway would completely change the course of their lives. The Madison Institute for Advanced Rehabilitation stood imposingly on the west side of Los Angeles, a building of modern lines and mirrored glass that reflected the next morning's sky. Sophia parked her Mercedes in the reserved spot and took a deep breath, questioning herself for the 1,000th time if she wasn't making a huge mistake. Beside her, in the passenger seat, Leo looked at the building in awe. After a night in the guest room of the Madison mansion, where Sophia had observed, with a mixture of compassion and curiosity, how the boy behaved with strange politeness despite his humble origins, she had decided to take him to the institute founded by her father, where Anthony received his regular treatments. "Is this where your father gets treated?" Leo asked, impressed. "Yes," Sophia replied dryly, still uncertain about her own decision. "And this is where you'll show if you really know what you're talking about, or if you're just a boy with a fertile imagination." Leo didn't seem fazed by the skeptical tone. "You'll see, ma'am. I just need a chance." Sophia helped her father settle into the wheelchair, and the three entered the institute. The name Madison opened doors, literally. A single call the previous night was enough for Dr. Richard Nelson, the institute's medical director and a personal family friend for decades, to agree to receive them at a special time, before the official start of appointments. "Sophia, dear, what a surprise to bring Anthony on an unscheduled day," said Dr. Richard, a man in his 60s, with perfectly trimmed grey hair and thin-framed glasses that accentuated his academic air. His curious gaze shifted to Leo, who remained a few steps behind. "And I see we have a visitor. Richard, this is Leo. Well, it's a long story. Can we talk in private?" While Sophia explained the situation to the doctor in his office, Leo waited in the physical therapy room with Anthony. The boy looked with interest at the sophisticated equipment, occasionally touching a device with an almost religious reverence. "Do you come here every day?" he asked Anthony, who nodded slightly. "And does it get better?" Anthony made a vague gesture with his hand, indicating little progress. "I see," Leo murmured, moving closer to the chair. "Can I see your legs?" Without waiting for an answer, he knelt and gently touched Anthony's knee through his dress pants. His fingers moved with precision, as if they could see through the fabric, the skin, the muscles. "It's all locked up here," he commented, more to himself than to the man. "The problem isn't just in the lower back. It's like a rusty chain. It needs oil in every link, not just the one that broke." Through the glass door, Sophia observed the interaction with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Beside her, Dr. Richard shook his head, skeptical. "Sophia, I understand your hope, but this is absurd. A street boy with no training whatsoever cannot do what entire teams of specialists haven't been able to do in 5 years." "I know, Richard. But you didn't hear how he spoke yesterday. The medical terms, the precision, and besides, look at my father. Have you seen him show so much interest in anything in recent years?" The doctor sighed, giving in. "Very well. We'll give the boy 5 minutes. If it weren't for you and the respect I have for your father, I wouldn't even consider this. But I want to make it clear that this goes against everything serious medicine represents." When they entered the room, they found Leo explaining something to Anthony, who listened with unusual attention. The boy interrupted himself when he saw the two adults. "Dr. Nelson will allow you to demonstrate what you claim to know how to do," Sophia announced, choosing her words carefully. "But only for observation, understand? Nothing invasive." "I need to touch his back," Leo said simply. "Here in the lumbar region and then the muscle I mentioned." The doctor crossed his arms, disbelieving. "And how do you intend to assess if there has been improvement?" "We have electromyography equipment that—" "No need for that," Leo interrupted. "When the muscle relaxes and stops compressing the nerve, Mr. Anthony will feel it immediately. He might not be able to walk right away, but he'll feel a tingling sensation going down his leg." Dr. Richard exchanged a significant look with Sophia. It was evident that both doubted, but for different reasons, they were willing to allow that improvised demonstration. "Let's go to the manual physical therapy room," the doctor decided. "We have a suitable table there." 15 minutes later, Anthony was lying face down on the table, his lower back exposed. Leo had asked to wash his hands, a procedure he performed with meticulous attention, as if executing a sacred ritual. Sophia noticed, surprised, that he used proper medical hand-washing technique, methodically covering all areas of his hands. "I'll start now," the boy announced, positioning himself beside the table. "It might hurt a little at first, Mr. Anthony, but then it will get better." His small, slender, but surprisingly firm hands rested on Anthony's lower back. For a few seconds, they merely rested there, as if mapping the territory. Then they began to press specific points with a precision that made Dr. Richard lean in to observe better. "Is this an acupressure technique?" the doctor asked, professional interest momentarily overcoming his skepticism. "My grandfather called it awakening the pathways," Leo replied, without diverting his attention from his work. "It's like waking up a sleeping river." Sophia watched everything with a racing heart. There was something hypnotic about that scene. The contrast between the high-tech luxury of the physical therapy room and that ancestral procedure, between the street boy and the millionaire businessman, between modern medicine and traditional knowledge. "Now I'm going to the piriformis muscle," Leo announced. "This part is the most important." His hands slid to the hip region, precisely finding the spot where the small muscle, deeply nestled in the pelvis, could be accessed. The pressure gradually increased, with Leo using not only his fingers, but the weight of his own body to apply controlled force. That's when it happened. A visible spasm ran through Anthony's right leg. It wasn't a voluntary movement. It seemed more like a reflex, like a startle. But it was movement, undoubtedly. "See?" Leo said, without interrupting what he was doing. "The nerve is starting to respond." Dr. Richard quickly approached, checking Anthony's vital signs and observing his legs with clinical attention. "Anthony, did you feel anything?" the doctor asked, unable to hide the surprise in his voice. The businessman emitted an affirmative sound, the most verbal communication he usually offered. But his right hand moved, squeezing Sophia's fingers, who had been holding his hand since the beginning of the procedure. "Dad," Sophia murmured, feeling the unusual pressure of his fingers. "Tingling," Anthony said, his voice hoarse from disuse. "I feel tingling." The word, simple as it was, caused an electrifying impact in the room. It was the first time in months that Anthony had spoken spontaneously, and the content of his speech was even more significant. "Impossible," Dr. Richard murmured, running his hand through his grey hair in a nervous gesture. "This can't—" "But it's happening," Sophia completed, looking at Leo with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "It's really happening." Leo continued the procedure for a few more minutes, explaining each movement with disconcerting naturalness. "This point here is where the nerve is most trapped. It's like a knot in a hose. The water wants to pass but can't. I'm undoing the knot." When he finished, he took a step back, observing his work with a serious expression. He seemed older at that moment, as if the knowledge he carried gave him a maturity beyond his years. "He'll need more sessions," he declared, with the confidence of an experienced doctor. "One time isn't enough. The body has forgotten how to function properly. It needs to relearn." Dr. Richard helped Anthony turn over on the table, now on his back. The businessman was visibly affected, not just physically but emotionally. There was color in his face, a sparkle in his eyes that Sophia hadn't seen in years. "Dad, how are you feeling?" she asked, holding his hand tightly. "Alive," Anthony replied with a faint smile. "I feel alive, daughter." Sophia felt tears in her eyes but held them back. It was not a time for uncontrolled emotions. There were many questions, many decisions to make. "Richard, what do you think?" she asked the doctor, who was examining Anthony's legs with an intrigued expression. "Honestly, I don't know what to think," he admitted, with the rare humility of a professional confronted with something that defies his knowledge. "There is an unequivocal neurological response. The Babinski reflex test is different. There are reflexes that were not present in last week's evaluation." He paused, looking at Leo. Whatever this boy did, it produced a real physiological alteration. "It's not psychosomatic." Leo observed the scene calmly, as if the result was exactly what he expected. When Sophia approached him, she noticed that despite his confident posture, the boy was trembling slightly. "Are you okay?" she asked, concerned. "Just tired," he admitted with a shy smile. "This uses a lot of energy." At that moment, looking at that scrawny boy who had just accomplished something that conventional medicine would consider impossible, Sophia made a decision. She didn't know exactly what was happening nor how to explain it, but she was absolutely certain of one thing. Leo would not go back to the streets. Not as long as she could prevent it. "Let's go home," she said, naturally including the boy in that familiar we. "You need to rest. And then we'll talk about how to continue this." Dr. Richard, still stunned by what he had witnessed, merely nodded when Sophia announced they would return the next day. "I'll organize a full battery of tests," he said. "I want to document every change, no matter how small." As they left the institute, with Anthony in his wheelchair but visibly more alert and present than in years, Sophia felt she had just crossed a portal into a new and unknown world. A world where the scientific certainties that had always guided her life were challenged by the inexplicable wisdom of a street boy. And surprisingly, she felt no fear. She felt hope. 3 weeks had passed since Leo's first treatment. The Madison Mansion, once a place of heavy silences and meticulously timed routines, had gained a new energy. The guest room, transformed into a permanent abode for Leo, still maintained the sobriety of its original decor, but now displayed small signs of personalization: a Lakers poster taped to the wall, a few anatomy books stacked on the nightstand, a growing collection of colorful stones on the windowsill. Sophia observed these changes with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. In just 21 days, that unknown boy had infiltrated their lives like water finding cracks in a dam. And, like water, he brought both life and the threat of destabilizing solid structures. "Miss Sophia, may I speak with you for a minute?" The voice of Margaret, The housekeeper, who had served the Madison family for over 30 years, interrupted her thoughts. Sophia nodded, indicating the chair in front of her in the large kitchen where she was having her breakfast. "It's about the boy," Margaret began, nervously twisting her apron between her fingers. "Don't you think we need to know more about him? Who he really is, where he came from?" Sophia sighed. It wasn't the first time the employee had expressed concern about Leo, though always with the care of someone who knew her place in the household hierarchy. "I've already hired a private investigator, Margaret. We're waiting for the full report." "And what does Dr. Edward say about all this?" The mention of Edward Matthews, her father's partner and current CEO of Madison Pharmaceuticals, made Sophia tense. Edward still didn't know about Leo, a deliberate omission she had maintained for 3 weeks, knowing his reaction would be, at the very least, explosive. "Dr. Edward doesn't need to know everything that happens in this house," she replied dryly, ending the conversation. That same morning at the Madison Institute, Anthony was undergoing his 5th treatment session with Leo, under the watchful supervision of Dr. Richard and a growing team of specialists who joined each visit. The businessman's case, once considered a classic example of permanent post-traumatic paraplegia, was beginning to generate buzz in Los Angeles medical circles. "Now I'm going to work on the fascial chain that connects the lumbar to the knee," Leo explained, as his small but steady hands moved over Anthony's legs with surgical precision. "It's like a spider web that surrounds everything. When one thread gets too tense, it pulls all the others." Dr. Richard, who initially observed the procedures with scientific skepticism, now took meticulous notes, occasionally photographing the boy's movements. "The results of the latest MRI are truly intriguing," he commented to another neurologist who had been invited to observe. "Perineural inflammation has significantly decreased, and there are signs of axonal regeneration that we wouldn't expect to see at this stage. Relax here." "Mr. Anthony," Leo instructed, oblivious to the technical discussions around him. "Breathe deeply and imagine the light going down your legs to your feet." Anthony, lying on the table with his eyes closed, followed the instructions with a confidence that surprised everyone who knew him before the accident. The authoritarian and pragmatic businessman now surrendered like a disciple into the hands and words of a street boy. When the session ended, Anthony was able, for the first time since the accident, to voluntarily move his toes. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible but unequivocal movement. The room erupted in hushed exclamations, and Sophia, who had arrived a few minutes earlier, rushed to her father's side, holding his hand tightly. "Dad, did you see that?" "You did it." Anthony smiled, a true smile that illuminated his face, marked by years of frustration and resignation. "I felt every toe, Sophia. Every single one of them." Leo observed the scene with an expression strangely subdued for someone so young. There was pride there, no doubt, but also something more, a shadow Sophia couldn't decipher. On the way back home, with Leo silent in the back seat of the car, Sophia decided to confront this perception. "You seem worried," she commented, looking at the boy in the rearview mirror. "Aren't you happy with my father's progress?" Leo looked away at the urban landscape passing by the window. "I am happy, Miss Sophia. It's just that—" "Just what?" "I'm afraid that one day you'll find out everything and send me away." The frankness of the answer caught Sophia by surprise. "Find out what, Leo? Is there something you're not telling me?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Sophia parked the car at the first opportunity, a spot in front of a tree-lined square in the Beverly Hills neighborhood. She turned off the engine and turned to face the boy. "Leo, look at me. Whatever it is, we can talk about it." The boy continued to look out the window, but Sophia could see the reflection of his teary eyes in the glass. "My grandfather always said that the truth is like bitter medicine. It hurts at first, but it heals afterward," he murmured, finally turning to face her. "I know about your father's accident." "I know more than I've told." Sophia felt a shiver run down her spine. "What do you mean?" "I was there," Leo confessed, the words coming out like heavy stones. "On the highway that night." The silence inside the car became dense, almost palpable. Sophia felt her heart racing, a mixture of confusion and apprehension taking over her. "What do you mean you were there?" "You were very small, Leo. You must be confusing things." "No, I'm not," he insisted, now with tears streaming freely down his face. "I was 7 years old. I was with my grandfather." We were coming by bus from Sacramento, but the bus broke down nearby. My grandfather said we were going to cross the highway to hitchhike on the other side. Sophia listened, astonished, as Leo recounted a version of the accident she had never heard. According to the boy, he had frozen in fear in the middle of the road when he saw the headlights of Anthony's car approaching. His grandfather had pushed him out of the way, saving his life. Anthony, trying to avoid hitting the old man, lost control of the vehicle, which veered off the road and rolled over several times before stopping in the embankment. My grandfather took me away from there. He said we couldn't stay, that they would blame us. Leo continued, sobbing. He was very sad afterward. He always said we owed the man in the car. Sophia felt numb. The puzzle pieces began to fit together. Leo's knowledge of the accident, his mysterious appearance at the exact location on the anniversary of the tragedy, his almost obsessive determination to help Anthony. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she asked, her voice more tired than accusatory. "I was afraid you would turn me over to the police, or worse, that you wouldn't let me help your father." Sophia closed her eyes, trying to process it all. The police report of the accident mentioned adverse weather conditions and possible mechanical failure. There were no witnesses, or so they thought. The official version, which she had accepted for years, was now challenged by this improbable account. "Leo, do you understand what you're telling me?" "If this is true—" "It's true, I swear on my grandfather's memory," the boy interrupted with an intensity that left no doubt about his sincerity. "And there's more. My grandfather wasn't just any healer. He was famous back in Georgia. Important people came from afar to be treated by him." "What kind of important people?" "Once a man came from Los Angeles. Rich, in a suit. He had back problems, pain that no doctor could solve. My grandfather cured him in 3 sessions. A chill ran through Sophia. "Do you remember that man's name?" Leo shook his head. "It was complicated, I didn't remember. But I remember that when he left a card. That had a drawing of green leaves, just like the symbol of your family's medicine stores." Sophia felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. The logo of Madison Pharmaceuticals was, in fact, a stylized representation of medicinal herb leaves, an irony for a company that had built its empire fighting alternative medicine with cutting-edge science. "My father knew your grandfather," she murmured, more to herself than to Leo. "He knew him, but he didn't believe him. He laughed and said it was ignorant people's stuff. My grandfather was very sad. He said that one day he would understand that there are things microscopes don't see." The revelation was too surreal for Sophia to fully process. The possibility that her father, the rational scientist, had consulted a traditional healer and then rejected his methods, only to have his mobility restored years later by that same man's grandson, seemed like an elaborate trick played by fate. "Is that why you appeared on that specific day?" Sophia asked, beginning to connect the dots. "Did you intentionally seek us out?" Leo nodded slowly. "I dreamed of my grandfather. He showed me the place, told me the date. He said it was my chance to fix things. A dream, a street boy following the call of a deceased grandfather through a dream." At any other time in her life, Sophia would have dismissed it as childish fantasy, or worse, as an elaborate manipulation. But after witnessing her father's inexplicable progress, her certainties had become too fragile to reject any possibility. "And why are you only telling me all this now?" "Because today is the first day your father moved his fingers," Leo replied with disconcerting simplicity. "My grandfather said that the truth should only be told when the body is strong enough to receive it." Sophia wiped a tear that had streamed down her face without her noticing. She felt exhausted, as if she had run an emotional marathon. The world she knew, ordered, scientific, predictable, was crumbling a little more each day since Leo's arrival. And yet there was something liberating in that crumbling. "What happened to your grandfather?" she asked, softening her voice. "After the accident, I mean. He was never the same. He kept repeating that we had a debt, that we needed to fix what we broke." Leo paused, taking a deep breath. 2 years later, he fell ill. A bad flu that turned into pneumonia. Before he passed, he made me promise that one day I would find the man in the car and pay our debt. "And you ran away from the shelter to fulfill that promise?" "I had no choice," he replied, with a maturity that contrasted painfully with his childlike appearance. "It was my grandfather's last wish." Sophia started the car again, but didn't put it in motion. She needed another moment to absorb it all. Leo, what happened wasn't your fault. You were a child, but now I can fix it. I can make your father walk again. The conviction in the boy's voice was moving and in some way comforting. In a world where everything seemed uncertain, that certainty, even coming from a child, was a safe harbor. I won't send you away, Sophia said finally, looking at him in the rearview mirror. But we need to be honest with each other from now on. No more secrets, agreed? Leo nodded, wiping his tears with the sleeve of his t-shirt. Agreed. As she drove back home, Sophia knew a difficult conversation awaited her. She would need to tell her father about Leo's revelation, although she had no idea how he would receive the news. More than that, she would need to confront Edward Matthews. Her father's partner could not be kept in the dark for much longer, especially now that rumors of Anthony's miraculous recovery were beginning to circulate in Los Angeles business circles. What Sophia didn't imagine was that, at that exact moment, Edward was already on his way to the Madison mansion, driven by a curiosity that would quickly turn into fierce opposition to the boy who threatened not only his worldview, but also his carefully orchestrated plans for the future of Madison Pharmaceuticals. Absolutely unacceptable. Edward Matthews' voice echoed through the walls of the Madison Mansion's office, an austere room decorated with dark wood furniture and shelves filled with scientific books and business trophies. At 55, with his impeccably tailored suit and strategically trimmed gray hair to convey authority, the minority partner and current CEO of Madison Pharmaceuticals seemed the personification of corporate indignation. First, you harbor a street boy without any background check. Then you allow him to apply unproven techniques to your father. And now you tell me that all the documented medical progress in recent weeks is based on, what, quackery? Superstition? This is madness, Sophia. Sophia remained calm, seated behind the desk that had belonged to her father. The past 5 years had trained her to deal with men like Edward, powerful, accustomed to having the last word, convinced of their own infallibility. The results speak for themselves, Edward. My father was able to move his toes for the first time in 5 years. He is regaining sensation in his legs. This is not superstition. These are documented medical facts by Dr. Richard. Richard Nelson is ruining his reputation by endorsing this farce, Edward retorted, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. Do you have any idea what this means for the company? Our main product line is medicines based on rigorous scientific evidence. How will I explain to shareholders that the company's founder is being treated by a child shaman? Sophia took a deep breath, containing her rising irritation. Since Edward's unexpected arrival at the mansion 2 hours earlier, the conversation had followed this circular pattern. For every piece of evidence she presented about her father's improvement, he responded with aggressive skepticism and corporate concerns. No one is suggesting abandoning science, Edward. We are simply recognizing that there may be valid knowledge outside the scope of conventional medicine. Valid knowledge? Edward laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Sophia, your father built an empire fighting precisely this kind of thinking. Madison Pharma pioneered in unmasking charlatans who promised miraculous cures based on ancient wisdom. And now you want me to believe that a street kid succeeded in weeks what entire teams of scientists couldn't do in years. The sound of the door opening interrupted the discussion. Anthony Madison entered the office in his wheelchair, pushed by Leo. The contrast between the two couldn't have been greater. The septuagenarian businessman in his silk pajamas and leather slippers, and the street boy in faded jeans and a Lakers t-shirt. And yet, there was a synchronicity between them, a silent complicity that visibly annoyed Edward. I thought I'd find you here. Edward, Anthony said, his voice stronger and clearer than it had been in weeks. Margaret told me you arrived making a scene. Edward immediately adjusted his posture and expression, transforming indignation into professional concern. Anthony, my friend, I am merely expressing legitimate concerns. Your health and the future of the company are intimately linked. My health has never worried you as much as the company's shares, Anthony replied, with a frankness that surprised even Sophia. The accident and subsequent years had softened the edges of the businessman, previously known for his calculated diplomacy. Anyway, I came to communicate a decision. Sophia told me everything about the boy. A tense silence filled the office. Leo remained a few steps behind Anthony's chair, looking at the floor with a mixture of shame and apprehension. Sophia moved to her father's side, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "And what was your reaction to this revelation?" Edward asked, barely disguising his disdain. "Initially, I was disturbed," Anthony admitted. "The idea that the accident could have been avoided. That all these years in a wheelchair." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But then I realized something important. If the boy hadn't been on that road that night, perhaps he wouldn't be here now to help me." Edward shook his head, incredulous. "This is Stockholm Syndrome, Anthony. You are developing positive feelings for someone directly responsible for your suffering." "No, Edward," Anthony replied calmly. "This is called forgiveness, something you might need to learn one day." The tension in the office was palpable. Edward seemed about to retort when Sophia intervened. "Dad, you need to rest. Leo, please take him back to his room." After the two left, Edward abandoned any pretense of cordiality. "This is collective madness. The boy confessed involvement in the accident that left Anthony paralyzed, and you treat him like a savior. We should be calling the police, not protecting him. He was 7 years old, Edward. He was a scared child who was pushed off the road by his grandfather. A convenient story that we can't verify because, surprise, the supposed grandfather is no longer with us." Edward approached the desk, leaning in to face Sophia. "Have you considered that all this could be an elaborate manipulation? Who guarantees that this boy isn't part of some scheme to infiltrate the Madison family?" Sophia met his gaze without flinching. "I have the full report from the private investigator I hired. Leo Santana, 12 years old, born in Savannah, rural Georgia. Son of a single mother who died when he was 2, raised by his maternal grandfather, Sebastian Sanders, known locally as Old Man Seb, a respected healer in the region." She opened a folder on the table, pushing it towards Edward. After his grandfather's death, Leo went through 3 different orphanages, escaping from all of them. His last official record is from 8 months ago, when he was seen in Sacramento, surviving on odd jobs. And yes, there are records that Sebastian Sanders and his grandson were on a bus bound for Los Angeles on the date of the accident. The bus indeed broke down near the collision site. Edward flipped through the report with a closed expression, looking for flaws, contradictions, anything he could use to discredit the boy. "That still doesn't explain the supposed healing powers," he argued finally. "Unless you also believe in magic now." "I don't believe in magic. I believe in knowledge not catalogued by Western science." Sebastian Sanders studied with traditional healers throughout South America. There are records of impressive cures performed by him. Sophia paused, observing Edward's reaction. "In fact, we found something interesting in my father's personal archives. An airline ticket to Atlanta, dated 8 years ago, followed by 3 days of lodging receipts in Savannah." Edward visibly paled, and Sophia knew she had hit a sensitive spot. "You knew, didn't you? You knew my father consulted Sebastian Sanders before the accident." "Anthony traveled frequently. I don't remember every destination," Edward deflected, looking away. "Stop lying," Sophia exploded, slamming her hand on the table. "You were his right-hand man. You controlled his schedule, his appointments. It must have been you who recommended the healer when conventional doctors failed to treat his chronic pains." Edward remained silent for a few seconds, as if calculating the risks of continuing to deny it. Finally, he sighed. "Yes, I was the one who suggested it. Anthony was desperate with back pain. Nothing worked. Painkillers, physical therapy, medical acupuncture. A contact in Atlanta mentioned Sebastian." He ran his hand over his face, looking suddenly older. "It was a terrible mistake. Anthony came back furious, saying the old man was a charlatan who wanted to convince him to abandon proven medications for primitive rituals. It was after that we decided to launch the Science Against Superstition campaign." Sophia felt as if pieces of a complex puzzle were finally falling into place. The Science Against Superstition campaign had been Madison Pharma's most controversial and lucrative project. A series of commercials and publications that ridiculed alternative treatments while promoting the company's line of painkillers. And you never thought it relevant to mention this detail when Leo appeared. When he started applying techniques surprisingly similar to those his grandfather would have offered my father, why would I mention it? It was irrelevant. Edward moved away from the table, pacing nervously around the office. Sophia, you don't understand what's at stake here. If this story leaks to the press, the founder of Madison Pharma being cured by the grandson of the same healer he publicly ridiculed, it will be a disaster. Shares will plummet. Competitors will use this against us. Years of building scientific credibility will go down the drain. Sophia observed the man she had considered almost an uncle for years, seeing him now in a completely different light. It wasn't concern for Anthony that motivated him, not even genuine scientific skepticism. It was fear of losing control, fear that the carefully constructed empire could be shaken by an inconvenient truth. Is that why you oppose Leo so fiercely? For fear of a corporate scandal? I oppose him because he is a threat to everything we've built. Edward replied, no longer trying to disguise his anger. Anthony dedicated his life to building a company based on scientific principles. Do you really want to throw it away because of the magic hands of a street kid? Before Sophia could respond, they were interrupted by Margaret's abrupt entry. Miss Sophia, come quickly. It's your father. Sophia's heart immediately raced. What happened? He... Margaret seemed breathless, torn between shock and joy. He's standing, miss. With a walker, but he's standing. Sophia ran to her father's room with Edward reluctantly following. What they found left them paralyzed at the door. Anthony Madison, supported by a walker, took tentative steps across the room while Leo held him firmly by the waist. Dad, Sophia whispered, bringing her hands to her mouth. Anthony slowly turned, his face illuminated by a mixture of effort and triumph. 5 steps, Sophia. I counted every one of them. Tears came instantly, blurring Sophia's vision. It was a moment she had stopped expecting years ago, the sight of her father standing, moving, however precariously. How? When? After this morning's session, I felt a different tingling, Anthony explained, his voice broken by the effort. Leo said it was time to try. Sophia approached, touching her father's arm as if she needed to confirm that this was real. Behind her, Edward remained at the door, his face an unreadable mask. This is remarkable, he said finally with forced cordiality. But Anthony, you shouldn't be exerting yourself without medical supervision. Dr. Nelson is coming, Leo replied, without diverting his attention from his patient. I called him as soon as Mr. Anthony was able to stand. It was strange to see a 12-year-old boy commanding the situation with such authority, and stranger still to observe Anthony Madison, a man known for his fierce independence, accepting instructions without protest. 2 more steps. Mr. Anthony, and then we rest, Leo guided, with a mixture of firmness and gentleness. Strength is slowly returning. We cannot rush it. Sophia watched the interaction, marveling at the transformation of both. Her father, once resigned to immobility, now fought for every millimeter of progress with renewed determination. And Leo, the scared street boy, had become a confident healer, taking on a role that defied his age and origin. When Dr. Richard arrived 20 minutes later, Anthony had already returned to bed, exhausted but radiant. The doctor performed a battery of neurological tests, his expression oscillating between professional astonishment and genuine joy. This defies all medical literature on delayed recovery from spinal cord injuries, he declared, putting away his instruments. Not only is there a return of voluntary motor function, but also significant improvement in proprioception and superficial sensitivity. In plain English, Richard, Anthony requested, with a slight smile, your brain is reconnecting with your legs in a way that shouldn't be possible after so long, the doctor explained, looking at Leo with renewed curiosity. I would very much like to understand exactly how. I can show you, Doctor, Leo offered. It's no secret. My grandfather always said that knowledge kept secret is like stagnant water. It eventually spoils. The simplicity of the offer seemed to disarm the doctor, who nodded enthusiastically. That would be extraordinary. We could document the techniques, perhaps even publish a case study. Edward, who had remained silent until then, intervened. Before we start planning revolutionary medical publications, we need to consider the implications. Madison Pharma has a reputation to uphold. A premature association with unconventional methods could be detrimental. We're talking about Anthony's health, not the company's image, Dr. Richard retorted, with an unusual irritation in his usually diplomatic tone. Anthony's health and the future of the company are intertwined. As everyone in this room knows perfectly well, Edward replied in a cold tone. I suggest caution before we turn a promising, but still unproven, recovery into some kind of medical revolution. Sophia observed the growing tension between the two men, the dedicated doctor and the calculating executive, recognizing that this was just the first of many battles that would follow. Edward Matthews would not give up easily. He had too much to lose if Leo's unconventional treatment was legitimized. "I think we've had enough excitement for today," she intervened, noticing the evident fatigue on her father's face. "Edward, I appreciate your concern, but decisions about my father's treatment remain ours, his and mine." It was a clear demarcation of territory, almost a challenge. Edward understood the message, straightening up and adjusting his tie in a nervous gesture. "Naturally. I just hope these decisions are made with the same rationality that has always guided the Madison family." He headed for the door, stopping for a moment to look at Leo. "And as for you, boy, enjoy your moment of glory. Sooner or later the truth will come out." After Edward left, a heavy silence filled the room. It was Anthony who finally broke it. "He was always afraid of what he couldn't control," he commented with a tired sigh. "And unfortunately, he never managed to control the truth." Leo, who had remained silent during the confrontation, approached Anthony's bed. "You're tired. I'll make that tea I taught Margaret." When the boy left, Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, holding her father's hand. "This is going to get ugly, isn't it? Edward won't accept this easily." Anthony squeezed his daughter's hand with a strength that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. "No, he won't. But for the first time in years, I feel ready to fight." He looked at the door where Leo had exited. "That boy came to us carrying guilt from the past. The least I can do is ensure he has a future." Sophia nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. In just a few weeks, her priorities had completely changed. What was once a life defined by corporate obligations and resigned care for an invalid father had now transformed into a battle for something greater, the defense of knowledge that defied conventions, and the protection of a boy who, against all odds, was becoming part of her family. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Leo leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. Edward's words echoed in his mind, hitting insecurities he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge. Was he really a savior, as Sophia was beginning to believe? Or just a scared boy, desperately trying to pay an impossible debt? The future, once so uncertain, now seemed even more nebulous. But one thing was certain: there was no turning back. 3 months had passed since the day Anthony Madison took his first steps. The Los Angeles autumn painted the trees of Bel Air with golden and red hues, while inside the Madison mansion, a silent revolution continued its course. Leo woke up early that morning, as he always did. His room, which was no longer the guest room but a permanent space, decorated with anatomy books, Lakers posters, and a growing collection of stones and crystals, received the first rays of sun through the wide window. For a moment he lay there looking at the ceiling, letting the reality of his new life envelop him like a warm blanket. There were days when everything still seemed an improbable dream. The boy who wandered the streets of Los Angeles, sleeping in shelters when he was lucky or under overpasses when he wasn't, now lived in a mansion, attended a private school, and was treated almost as part of the family by people who, months earlier, belonged to a universe completely inaccessible to him. But it wasn't just his life that had changed. Anthony Madison, once confined to a wheelchair and plunged into resigned silence, now walked with the aid of a cane, spoke with renewed energy, and had partially resumed control of Madison Pharmaceuticals, to the consternation of Edward Matthews and the surprise of the market. Anthony's case had become a subject of intense debate in Los Angeles medical circles and beyond. Terms like unexplained recovery, atypical neuroplasticity, and anomalous physiological response were used by specialists trying to fit into the scientific paradigm what, to all intents and purposes, seemed like a medical miracle. Leo got up, meticulously made his bed, a habit Margaret had tried in vain to convince him to abandon, insisting that this was her job, and headed to the kitchen. It was Saturday, the day he usually prepared breakfast for the family, another small tradition that had established itself almost without them noticing. "Good morning, my young healer," Anthony greeted, already seated at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper with a cup of coffee beside him. His legs, once completely inert, now moved occasionally, a spasm here, an adjustment of position there, small daily miracles that no one else in the house took for granted. "Good morning." "Mr. Anthony," Leo replied, going directly to the refrigerator. "Today I'm making those banana and oat pancakes you liked." "Excellent. Sophia should be down in a few minutes. She's been working too hard, preparing everything for the board meeting on Monday." The board meeting. Leo felt a slight tightening in his stomach as he remembered. It had been a frequent topic of conversation in the house in recent weeks. The moment Anthony would officially present his plan to create a research institute dedicated to integrating traditional medicine knowledge with modern scientific practices, a project that, as Leo well knew, faced fierce opposition from Edward Matthews and his allies on the board. "Do you think they'll approve?" he asked, cracking eggs into the bowl with a precision his new life hadn't erased. Anthony folded the newspaper, observing the boy with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see far beyond words. "We're entering uncharted territory, Leo. For decades, Madison Pharma built its reputation fighting what we called alternative medicine. Some will see our new direction as a betrayal of those principles. Then why insist?" "Because truth is more important than pride," Anthony replied simply. "I spent my life defending science, but I forgot that true science never stops questioning, never stops learning. I rejected knowledge I didn't understand, ridiculed traditions I didn't respect. And look at me now, walking thanks to the hands of a boy who carries precisely that knowledge I despised." Leo smiled shyly, concentrating on the pancakes to hide his embarrassment. He still hadn't gotten used to the frequent compliments, nor the reverence with which many people now treated him, especially the doctors and therapists who regularly came to the mansion to monitor Anthony's progress and, not infrequently, to observe the techniques of the young healer, as some called him. "Good morning, family." Sophia entered the kitchen, more relaxed than Leo had seen her in weeks. She wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, a casual look that still surprised those accustomed to seeing her perpetually in impeccable pantsuits. Pancakes. You really know how to win hearts and stomachs, Leo." The lightness in Sophia's voice contrasted with the tension of recent weeks. Since the confrontation with Edward, she had taken the lead in the battle for the company's new direction, facing resistance not only from her father's partner, but also from conservative shareholders and skeptical business partners. "I received an interesting call last night," she commented, pouring herself orange juice, "from Dr. Camila Vasconcelos, that neuroscientist from UCLA who visited Dad last month." "And what did she want?" Anthony asked, visibly interested. "To propose a partnership for the new institute. She runs a neuroplasticity lab and was fascinated by Leo's techniques. She wants to study them scientifically, develop protocols that can be replicated and tested." Leo stopped stirring the pancake batter, surprised. "She thinks other doctors can learn what I do?" "Actually, she thinks what you do can revolutionize our understanding of neurological recovery," Sophia replied. "And she's not the only one. I've received 6 similar proposals in the last week, from universities, research centers, even a hospital in Germany." Anthony nodded, satisfied. That's how it should be. It's not about choosing between tradition and science, but about uniting the best of both worlds. The conversation was interrupted by Margaret's entrance, with a worried expression. "Miss Sophia, Dr. Edward is here. He says he needs to speak with you urgently." Sophia and Anthony exchanged tense glances. Edward's visits had become increasingly rare and invariably tempestuous in recent months. "Send him in," Anthony decided. "It's time we resolve this once and for all." Edward Matthews entered the kitchen like a contained storm, his dark suit and grim expression contrasting with the homey atmosphere of the family scene. He paused for a moment upon seeing Leo preparing breakfast, as if the domesticity of the scene disconcerted him. "Anthony, Sophia," he greeted dryly, deliberately ignoring the boy. "We need to talk." "In private." "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of Leo," Sophia replied firmly. "He's part of this family now." Edward's expression hardened. "Very well. I came to inform you that I have called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. Not on Monday, today." "By what authority?" Anthony questioned, his voice calm but firm. "By the authority of someone who is still the CEO of this company and has the support of 40% of the shareholders," Edward replied coldly. Anthony, I know you plan to present this Institute project at Monday's meeting. I cannot allow you to throw Madison Pharma's reputation away for a sentimental whim. Sentimental whim? Anthony repeated, incredulous. Edward, I'm walking. After 5 years, I'm moving, feeling my legs. This is a medical miracle that could benefit thousands of people. It's a statistical anomaly with no scientific explanation, Edward retorted. And you want to base an entire new business direction on it? Risk decades of scientific reputation because of the magic hands of a street boy. Leo felt the impact of the words like a physical blow, but remained silent, concentrating on the pancakes that were now flipping in the pan. Sophia stood up, facing Edward. Enough. You've gone too far, Edward. What really bothers you? That my father is getting better? Or that he is regaining control of the company you secretly hope to inherit? The flush on Edward's face confirmed what Sophia had suspected for months. During Anthony's years of incapacity, his partner had grown accustomed to absolute power, redirecting the company according to his own vision and, presumably, preparing to take over definitively when Anthony was no longer present. That's defamation, Edward protested, but his defensive tone betrayed his guilt. No, that's the truth, Anthony intervened with a surprisingly strong voice. Leaning on the table, he stood up without the aid of his cane, a feat that was still rare and impressive. Edward, we worked together for 30 years. I trusted you like a brother. When the accident happened, I left everything I built in your hands. And how do you repay me? Conspiring behind my back, discarding any treatment that might bring me back because it threatens your control. Edward took a step back, destabilized by the direct accusation and the sight of Anthony standing, facing him as an equal for the first time in years. This is absurd. I have always acted in the best interests of the company. The company, always the company, Anthony sighed. And while you protected the company's interests, you ignored the only thing that truly mattered: people, patients, lives we could be improving. Is that your vision now? Abandoning rigorous science for popular beliefs? Edward laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You've grown old, Anthony. You've lost the clarity that made Madison what it is today. No, Edward. I've gained a clarity I never had before. Anthony looked at Leo, who observed the scene in silence. This boy has taught me more about healing in the last few weeks than I learned in decades in the pharmaceutical industry. Not because science is wrong, but because it is incomplete. There is knowledge that exists outside our laboratories, traditions that have survived for centuries because they work. Rejecting them out of academic arrogance is not science, it is dogmatism. The silence that followed was dense, laden with implications. Edward looked from Anthony to Sophia, and finally to Leo, as if trying to process a reality that completely escaped his control. You're really going through with this, he stated finally. It wasn't a question. I am, Anthony confirmed. On Monday, I will present my proposal for the Madison Institute of Integrative Medicine to the board. And if you've called a meeting for today, even better. We can resolve this more quickly. You don't have the votes, Anthony. The shareholders have already been consulted, Sophia interrupted with a slight smile of triumph. In recent weeks, while you were trying to undermine our proposal behind the scenes, I was gathering support. We have 62% of the votes guaranteed, Edward. Your emergency meeting will only accelerate our victory. Color drained from Edward's face. For a moment it seemed he would argue further, fight, but then his shoulders slumped in silent surrender. You have no idea what a mistake you're making, he said, heading for the door. At the exit, he paused and looked at Leo, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation. And as for you, boy, enjoy your moment of glory. Sooner or later, the truth will come out. After Edward left, a heavy silence remained in the kitchen. The smell of slightly burnt pancakes brought Leo back to reality. Sorry, he murmured, removing the pan from the heat. I got distracted. Don't worry about the pancakes, Sophia said gently. Are you okay? Edward was especially cruel today. Leo shrugged, but his expression betrayed his perturbation. He's right about one thing. I'm not a doctor or a scientist. I don't know how to explain why what I do works. What if I can't teach others? What if it's just luck? Anthony approached, leaning on the cane he always kept nearby, and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Leo, look at me. 3 months ago, I couldn't feel anything below my waist. Today, I'm standing, talking to you. That's not luck. It's knowledge. a different kind of knowledge that deserves to be studied and respected. But what if I can't help other people like I helped you? You're already helping, Sophia intervened. The protocols we've developed based on your techniques are being tested on 5 patients at the Institute. All are showing significant improvements. Leo seemed surprised. Really? No one told me. We wanted to be sure first, Sophia explained. But now it's confirmed. What you do isn't magic, Leo. It's a therapeutic approach that conventional medicine doesn't fully understand yet. But that produces replicable results. A shy smile began to form on the boy's face, but it was soon replaced by an expression of concern. And what will happen at the meeting today? Dr. Edward seemed very angry. Edward will have to adapt or leave, Anthony replied with unusual firmness. Madison Pharma is entering a new era, an era where science and tradition work together, not as adversaries. And what will my role be in all this? Leo asked, vocalizing the insecurity that had tormented him for weeks. When you no longer need me for treatments, Leo, Sophia interrupted, holding his hands firmly, you really haven't understood yet. It's not just about my father's treatment. We are building something bigger, a legacy that honors your grandfather's knowledge and opens doors for others like you. And as for your future, Anthony completed, we've already decided that, if you agree. Sophia has started the formal adoption process. We want you to be part of this family, not as a guest or a healer, but as a Madison. The words hit Leo like a wave, tearing down the last barriers he had kept erected. The boy who had survived on the streets, who had learned never to let his guard down, who had carried the weight of guilt and loneliness for years, finally allowed himself to cry, not tears of sadness, but of relief, of belonging. Sophia embraced him, and soon Anthony joined the hug, creating a family circle that none of them had ever imagined possible months earlier. My grandfather would be so happy, Leo murmured between sobs. He always said that one day I would find my place. That afternoon, while the board meeting unfolded in Madison Pharma's central offices, culminating in the overwhelming approval of the new institute and Edward Matthews' surprisingly dignified resignation, Leo, Sophia, and Anthony headed to a place that had been a scene of pain, but now symbolized a new beginning. Mile marker 47 on Interstate 5 looked different under the late afternoon sun. The vegetation was greener, the asphalt less threatening. Anthony, leaning on his cane, walked slowly to the exact spot where the car had veered off the road 5 years earlier. Here, he said, taking a deep breath. It was here that one life ended and another began. Sophia, by his side, linked her arm with his, offering physical and emotional support. I think we both needed to come back here one last time. To close a cycle. Leo remained a few steps behind, feeling the symbolic weight of the moment. That place held painful memories for all of them. The accident that had changed Anthony and Sophia's lives, and the moment when, as a scared child, he had watched helplessly as the tragedy his grandfather had tried to prevent unfolded. Come here, Leo, Anthony called, extending his hand. You're part of this too. The boy approached, feeling simultaneously small and immense under the orange sky of dusk. My grandfather used to say that there are no coincidences, only encounters we don't yet understand, he said, his voice gaining confidence. Maybe all of this had to happen this way. Maybe, Anthony agreed. Or maybe we're just 3 broken people who, together, found a way to rebuild ourselves. Sophia smiled, looking at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. I think it's time to go home. We have an important meeting on Monday, the official launch of the Madison Institute of Integrative Medicine. With young Leo Madison as principal consultant, Anthony added, with evident pride in his voice. The new surname still sounded strange to Leo's ears, like a new garment that needed to be softened by wear. But there was something profoundly right about it all, as if an invisible circle, drawn years ago by forces none of them fully understood, was finally closing. As they walked back to the car, Anthony leaning lightly on Leo, Sophia observed the two with a sense of fulfillment she had never imagined possible in the dark days after the accident. The pain hadn't completely disappeared. Perhaps it never would. But it had been transformed into something new. Something that could help not only her family, but potentially thousands of others. The sun finally touched the horizon, painting the sky with shades of red and gold, as the car drove away from the place that for so long had been a symbol of loss, and now became a landmark of a new beginning. 3 lives once separated by circumstances, social class and age, now intertwined in an improbable but undeniable family. There were still many challenges ahead. Leo's adaptation to his new life, the implementation of the Institute, the continuation of Anthony's recovery. But for the first time in a long time, the future seemed not only possible but promising. And that in itself was already a miracle that no science or tradition could fully explain. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Leo, Sophia, and Anthony's journey has touched your hearts. For more stories that explore healing, forgiveness, and the bonds we form beyond blood, we've prepared a special playlist that you'll find by clicking to your left. If this narrative stirred emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like on this video. Daily we share stories that, like this one, reveal the extraordinary human capacity to transform pain into hope. We look forward to reading your comments on what touched you most in this story of healing and rebirth.